smokescreen that was only ever there in order to cover up for the fact that she and the Prime Minister reneged on their promises to the British people during the last general election. And a black hole that the OBR themselves, ironically at the government's behest, have said they will not legitimise.
Rachel Reeves promised a budget that would bring stability to the public finances. She called it a reset, a fresh start for the economy, but the reaction to her announcement wasn't exactly what she had hoped for. The Shadow Chancellor wasted no time in tearing into her plans, delivering a brutal critique that's still echoing in political circles today.
Mr. Speaker, at the last budget, the Right Honourable Lady said that she would bring stability to the public finances. Stability to the public finances. But this statement, more appropriately referred to as an emergency budget, has brought her to a cold hard.
Can I just say to you, quite rightly, I want to hear to the Chancellor. I know I want to hear the Shadow Chancellor. I don't need any help.
Reeves, once determined to lead with certainty, now faced sharp accusations. Inflation was soaring, growth slowing, and job prospects grim. The numbers didn't lie, nor did the Shadow Chancellor. Under her leadership, inflation was set to double, and growth predictions were slashed. These weren't empty claims. They were a direct consequence of her policies. The truth was out. And now, the big question is, what's next for Rachel Reeves?
Honourable Lady to a cold, hard reckoning. She has become very fond recently to talk about the world having changed. Well, indeed it has, Mr. Speaker. This country was growing at the fastest rate in the G7 only about a year ago. And just as the OECD and the Bank of England and other forecasters, and now we learn today, the OBR have stated, growth has been halved in this year, cut in two as a consequence of the decisions and the choices that the Right Honourable Lady made on her watch.
Rachel Reeves unveiled her spring budget with promises of stability and economic growth, painting a picture of a bright future. Her plan aimed to tackle inflation, create jobs, and strengthen the economy. But as the numbers came in, the reality was starkly different. Experts pointed to a sharp slowdown, inflation remained stubbornly high, and unemployment was set to rise. Economic growth was slashed, forecasts halved, and the government's financial stability seemed more fragile than ever. What began as a hopeful vision quickly turned into a reality that left many wondering if Reeves could deliver on her promises.
Inflation, which was down to 2%, bang on target on the very day of the last general election under a Conservative government. We are now told this year will be running at twice the level as was forecast under ourselves in 2024. This is going to mean prices bearing down on households and on businesses right across the country because of her choices. And the OBR also says, Mr. Speaker, that unemployment will be rising this year and next year and the year after. And in fact, across the forecast period, it will not decline at all. So much for the Right Honourable Lady's back to work plan.
The Shadow Chancellor wasted no time launching a passionate, ruthless attack on Rachel Reeves's spring budget. They slammed her for mismanaging the economy, exposing the harsh truth behind her policies. Despite her promises of stability, inflation rose, growth slowed, and unemployment climbed. Her back-to-work plans were deemed a failure, and accusations of reckless borrowing and spending followed. The Shadow Chancellor made it clear this budget wasn't a solution. It was a series of broken promises, setting the stage for an impending economic disaster.
And we have already seen, Mr. Speaker, what it means when it comes to controlling borrowing under this Chancellor. And yes, she has come forward now with a plan to squeeze spending later on in the forecast period. And she has, of course, told the OBR that these are the elements of spending restraint to which she will stick. But what do the markets think? And could I ask the Right Honourable Lady, given her track record, given the fact that she has failed to control spending and borrowing to date, what does she think the markets are going to make of her latest promises? But the Right Honourable Lady, Mr. Speaker, says, of course, that none of this is her fault. It is the war in Ukraine. It is President Trump It is tariffs. It is President Putin. It is the Conservatives. It is her legacy. It is anybody but her.
Rachel Reeves promised stability with her spring budget, but the reality couldn't be further from the truth. The Shadow Chancellor quickly called out her broken promises, highlighting the stark contrast between what was promised and what was delivered. Inflation is rising, unemployment is up, and growth forecasts have been halved. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, and other forecasters wasted no time in pointing out the devastating impact of her policies. Inflation, once expected to fall, is now set to double, driving prices higher and further squeezing families and businesses. Growth, once showing signs of recovery, has now been slashed, leaving the economy to grow at a slower pace. The country's financial outlook grows bleaker by the day, proof of the mismanagement the Shadow Chancellor fiercely condemned.
Well, what the British people know, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a consequence of her choices. She is the architect of her own misfortune. It was the Right Honourable Lady, Mr. Speaker, who talked down the economy. Who talked down the economy so that business surveys and confidence crashed through the floor. It was the Right Honourable Lady who confected the £22 billion black hole. A smokescreen that was only ever there in order to cover up for the fact that she and the Prime Minister reneged on their promises to the British people.
The promises of a thriving economy under Rachel Reeves now feel like a distant dream. Her inability to control public finances has become a key point of attack. The Shadow Chancellor wasted no time accusing her of mismanaging the economy, and the numbers prove it. Under her leadership, inflation has spiraled far beyond expectations, now predicted to be double the original forecast, crushing household budgets. Unemployment, too, continues to rise. Joblessness is set to increase year after year, with no relief in sight for workers. Her back-to-work plans, once a central promise, have failed to deliver any meaningful results.
Targets. She borrowed and spent and taxed like it was the 1970s. Little wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the Chancellor has tanked the economy. Little wonder we have an emergency budget, all because of her choices. Now, the Chancellor likes to tour the television studios and tell everybody they should be thankful that she will not be ramping up taxes in this emergency budget as she did before. But that will be cold comfort to the millions up and down the country waiting in fear and trepidation for the start of the new tax year.
Yes, exactly.
Buckling under the burden of tax that will be rising to the highest tax burden on her watch in the history of our country. And so could I ask the Right Honourable Lady if when she replies in a moment, she will give that much needed reassurance, particularly to businesses, that she will not be ramping up taxes still further in the autumn.
The financial outlook has worsened under Rachel Reeves. Growth projections have been halved and public debt continues to climb. These consequences are directly tied to her economic policies. A stagnant economy, rising unemployment, and relentless inflation, all signs of her mismanagement. Reeves faced serious accusations over the alleged £22 billion black hole in public finances. The Shadow Chancellor called it pure fantasy, accusing her of using it as a smokescreen to deflect blame from her failing policies. Critics argued that the black hole was a distraction meant to cover up her inability to address real economic issues. The OBR responded with skepticism, refusing to legitimize the claim and questioning its credibility from the start. Their stance made it clear the alleged black hole was more of a diversion than a legitimate concern. This only deepened doubts about the accuracy and reliability of Reeves's budget claims. Instead of tackling real problems, she seemed to be fabricating a crisis to explain away the growing mess under her leadership.
Chancellor hasn't been in this role. Sarah Chancellor hasn't been in this role for very long, but I mean, at least he's not misquoting Shakespeare today. If this was a budget, then it would be the leader of the opposition responding. Now, I'm glad that she's still in her place. I know that she'll want to get back to her office for a lunchtime steak soon. But the Right Honourable gentleman, he talks about budgets. Let me remind the party opposite that the only emergency budget we have seen in recent years was in response to the party's disastrous mini budget. A mini budget that crushed the economy, sent mortgage bills spiralling.
Rachel Reeves has been accused of reckless borrowing and spending, leading to a debt burden the country can no longer sustain. Critics highlight that her financial management has driven national debt to alarming levels, with debt servicing costs now twice the size of the defense budget. This staggering figure shows how much is being spent on debt interest instead of essential services or investments in the economy. Under her leadership, fiscal targets have been repeatedly missed, raising doubts about her ability to manage the country's finances. Instead of prioritizing sustainable growth, the budget has relied on borrowing to fund spending, worsening the financial outlook. The failure to meet these targets has left the economy in a precarious state, with mounting debt and no clear path toward recovery, making it harder to secure the future stability that was promised.
Now, they might have forgotten about the damage that they did to our country, but the British people never will. But as always, the Shadow Chancellor talked a lot, but he didn't offer a single alternative. He says he opposes our tax rises, but he can't tell us whether he would cut the NHS to reverse them. He says he wants economic growth, but they abstained on the very planning reforms that the OBR have said will kickstart growth. Now, Mr. Speaker, you don't change the country by abstaining, by sitting on the fence. You change the country by leading, by taking action, and that is what this government are doing. And Mr. Speaker, he says he wants businesses to trade, but he doesn't want us to talk to the second largest economy in the world, or indeed our biggest trading partners in the European Union. He simply isn't serious.
The Shadow Chancellor slammed Rachel Reeves for blaming the country's economic woes on external factors like the war in Ukraine and the global downturn. Reeves claims these events sparked inflation and slow growth, but critics argue it's a convenient excuse. Many believe her reckless borrowing, poor financial planning, and failure to meet fiscal targets are to blame for the crisis. Rather than taking responsibility, she's pointing fingers. Public opinion suggests the damage could have been avoided with better choices, making her blame game feel like an attempt to dodge accountability. Rising taxes and struggling businesses are key issues post Reeves's budget, with job losses piling up. Morrison's cuts 200 jobs, Tesco sheds 400, and Sainsbury's slashes 3,000, a stark reminder that her policies failed to protect jobs and businesses.
4 months into the job and he's got no clue. He wants to talk about growth, but he doesn't say anything about the fact that the OBR has upgraded growth next year and every single year after. He talks about pensioners, but he forgets that it's his party to scrap the triple lock, which we are protecting and which will mean the state pension rising next month by over £400. And Mr. Speaker, he talks about wages, but he forgets the fact that we are boosting wages by boosting the national living wage from next month. And Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor says nothing about living standards or this morning's fall in inflation, because the last Parliament was the worst on record, and the OBR today have revised up their forecast for family finance.
The Federation of Small Businesses has sounded the alarm, revealing business confidence is at an all-time low. Small businesses, the backbone of the economy, are suffocating under higher taxes and rising costs. With closures mounting and job opportunities shrinking, the economic outlook is growing grim. Many are now questioning if Rachel Reeves's budget can ever deliver on its promises of stability and growth. The fallout from her budget is far from over, and as the economy falters, doubts about her leadership intensify. From soaring inflation to mass job losses, the impact is being felt everywhere. Can she turn it around, or has the damage already been done? Time will tell.
Mr. Speaker, working people are always better off with Labour. He is learning something, because at least this time he's asked a couple of questions, so let me respond to them. He asked what should the markets make. Well, what the market should see is that when I've been tested with a deterioration in the headroom, we have restored that headroom in full. That's the choices that I made. And he says that it's a slither of a headroom. Well, it's 50% more headroom than I inherited from the party opposite. When I was left with a slither of headroom, I rebuilt it after last government eroded it. That is the difference that we've made. And while whilst they left the public finances and the public services a mess, we wiped the slate clean, which means we have the flexibility now to increase defence spending, as we have done in the as the leader of the Labour Party has done. The party opposite had 14 years to increase defence spending, and now they lately come to the party. And the Shadow Chancellor mentions welfare reform and his time at the Department for Work and Pensions. What a legacy. 1 in 8 young people not in education, employment or training. 1,000 people a day going on to personal independence payments. And the OBR say today that welfare spending as a share of GDP will now start falling, a far cry from what we had.
If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with others, and subscribe for more updates. Let's keep the conversation going. What are your thoughts on the budget and its aftermath? Drop your comments below.